Greetings everyone, you're watching Addis Dialogue and this is Ahaklidu. The construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is now being celebrated throughout the nation as it hits 9 years. As the filling process is about to start in few months to come, the Egyptian government is now heralding what it says a concern. To talk about this and more, here with me Dr. Jacob Arsano, a senior water politics expert, and he's also one of the experts who has been in the GERD talk since the beginning. Thank you very much, Dr. Jacob Arsano, for being with me all the way. It's really a pleasure having you in our show, Doctor.
Thank you.
Let's begin with this. Now the dam is about to start filling. The talks which were the very concern of the beginning is now being coming up again. For instance, the historical privilege over the natural right. Let's start with this. What does it mean to say for Egyptians that the claim is more of a historical privilege than any other things?
As we all know, the Egyptian state has been claiming that they have historical rights over the Nile waters, including Abai, which flows out of Ethiopia. Not only Abai, but other big rivers that go out of Ethiopia and join the Nile, like Tekkeze, Barwa Kobo, and other smaller rivers like Dinder and Rahad. But this is absolutely wrong from many perspectives. In the first place, Egypt had a promise and written communication from the British government when Britain was a colonial power in many of the upstream countries of the Nile, and also Britain was a colonial power over Sudan together with Egypt, a condominium power. So one country in the most downstream location cannot by any means be the owner of the entire basin flow, which belongs to now 11 countries, including Egypt. So that is a wrong start, and that is a wrong history, and that is the wrong communication between the colonial Britain and the Egyptian government. So Egypt thinks that the Nile water, as long as it comes from wherever it is to their country, and that is water. Nobody and nowhere in the basin should touch the water without their permission or without their consent. So they think that they have the historical right, as they were promised and communicated by the British colonial government, but that is absolutely wrong, and that cannot be right now, and that can never be right, because Nile Basin countries are now very much attentive to develop the water resources in their own territories. If Egypt cooperates through, cooperative and good arrangements, if Egypt does not cooperate, then they want to develop their resources unilaterally in their own countries.
Yeah, since you were there from the beginning of the talks in the GERD, do you think any kind of shift from this claim of historical right by the Egyptian side?
Not what I know, because when Ethiopia declared the beginning of the construction of the dam, way back in 2011, Egypt was very much opposed to the idea, and Egypt never believed that Ethiopia can proceed with the construction of the dam. And the Ethiopian government, having noted that the Egyptian government has been very much uneasy, and that the government of Egypt was going around everywhere claiming that Ethiopia is stopping the water resources, building a huge, and that is going to go without water, and all that. So that was at the beginning, and the Ethiopian government thought, no, that is totally unfounded claim and worry. The Ethiopian government wanted to prove this, that the worry is not right. But the Ethiopian government also accepted, actually initiated, unprecedentedly, that let the three countries come together and internationally recruit top experts on hydrology, on hydrology means water resources, on environment, on dam, and also on socioeconomic, development. They proposed that let the three countries come together and, employ experts, work together, and check if there is other impacts, other than the dam safety. So that was the proposal. The International Panel of Experts of 4 international personalities with a high caliber and 6 engineers from Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. So from the very beginning, Egypt was claiming worry that the water is going to be stopped, which is not true. And in the process of International Panel of Experts, the 3 countries sat together and worked on a TOR for the International Panel of Experts. And in this TOR, that Ethiopia explained and asserted, and it is absolutely true again, that the dam was under construction because it's Ethiopia's sovereign authority, Ethiopia's sovereign privilege. It is within the Ethiopian territory. It is with the resources of Ethiopia that the dam is being built. It is for the best benefit of the Ethiopian population in order to enhance development. So Egypt, from the very beginning, rejected the construction of the dam, but nevertheless, Egypt wanted to go with the study, and the study came up with that result, and Egypt never believed to accept, those results. They did not want to accept those results. So that was not really. We cannot say that Egypt did not accept at the beginning, or Egypt accepted at the beginning, and Egypt rejecting now. But Egypt's position has always been that they have that kind of historical right, and if possible, they wanted to have permission, to be asked permission or to be notified. But other countries fully refuted Egypt's position that Egypt should not have and does not have historical right over the historical natural rights over the Nile waters. Rather, the rights and privileges and the possibilities of development has to be open for every country, and if there are cooperation, it has to be negotiated, and it has to be on the basis of agreement, which is mutually beneficial to all countries, or countries which cooperate across their borders on the transboundary water flows.
So let's now talk about the recent agreement which was undertaken in the U.S. Discussion. From the very beginning, do you think it was a right move to include the U.S. in the World Bank as an observer in this discussion, which was going on in the last decade with the riparian countries alone?
The filling and operation of the dam was further negotiated during the Declaration of Principles negotiation, where it was agreed that the filling of the dam will proceed with in parallel with the construction of the dam. That was agreed upon, and then the 3 countries have agreed to use the waters of the Nile on equitable and reasonable basis, but are not causing significant harm on any other country. So that is international accepted principle. At the same time, these 3 countries agreed upon this. And if there is a difference or dispute between the countries over the filling and operation of the dam, they will resort to the provision or principle 10. They can resort to dispute handling mechanism. One is reconciliation. The other one is mediation. The third one is the countries. I mean the three countries come together with mutual agreement. To deliberate on the question of the difference and to resolve it. But without going to sort to this principle, Egypt really lobbied the United States government to support Egypt on her side, and the United States government was in a way for their own point of view wanted to come and to support as observer in the negotiation between the three countries. Now, this offer was, requested through the U.S. Government, and Ethiopia, along Egypt and Sudan, accepted. Okay, this is a friendly country. It's a country with which Ethiopia has been cooperating and wants to cooperate in the future. So why don't we accept, the observer status while the three countries negotiate? So that was how Ethiopia accepted, as I understand. But whether or not to accept this and to go to Washington, D.C. To have this negotiating format, there was a lot of negotiation within the Ethiopian expert and government groups. Part of the Ethiopian negotiators and the government, institutions, they said there's no need to go to DC for this negotiation. Some said, okay, we go there with our own perspective and with our own position, and then Americans will not intervene and cannot dictate our own, interest and case. So with this condition, they went to the DC. But in any case, before going to DC for this to continue to negotiate under the observership of the World Bank and the U.S. government, scenarios were created. Worked out among the Ethiopian experts and the government institutions that if there is any imposition or if there is any pressure on Ethiopia from the Egyptian government different from the negotiation course, or if there is any pressure to be put on Ethiopia from the World Bank or from the United States, apart from being observer, then Ethiopia should withdraw from this process. And that was one of the scenarios. And it is under this kind of understanding that the Ethiopian government and experts went to DC, to continue negotiation, trilateral negotiation, in the presence of the U.S. And the World Bank. But this process was not comfortable for Ethiopia and for Sudan also, that the Americans and the World Bank started to be engaged in such a way it looks like they were on the side of Egypt rather than neutral observers during the negotiation. They started to upgrade their activity, their engagement to facilitator, and then they were told, especially by Ethiopia, that is not the way Ethiopia expects, that America and World Bank to facilitate the negotiation. Rather, they observe, and if they have any note, any advice, they can come only after that negotiation reaches to a stage. But the U.S. Representatives from the Treasury Department continued to increase their engagement to the extent that they started to facilitate in the drafting of the provisions of the statement. It was at that point that the Ethiopian government had a very strong position. No, that's not for us, and we cannot accept any kind of statement prepared by observer, and we cannot accept the status of the United States government as mediator because they have not formally been established as mediator. If mediator is needed, countries will resort to Article 10 of the DOP rather than accept the United States, upgrading itself from observer to mediator. So that's why at the end of January and also at the middle of February and at the end of February during the procedures of communications, Ethiopia said, no, we stop here and we don't continue this trilateral negotiation as long as the United States is in an obvious manner on the side of the Egyptian interest.
So now the U.S. Is shifting from observing to dictating what should be done in this three countries issue. Do you think that gives a tap on the shoulder for Egyptian politicians and the government officials to say, to go around and say the Nile is going to run out of the water and we're going to be suffered, like kind of propaganda?
No, I mean Nile is there for thousands of years, and Nile will be there for thousands of years, in the normal circumstances. What Ethiopia does not really dry the Nile up. What Ethiopia does at the moment is just building a dam. The dam is primarily for electricity, and after electricity is produced, the Nile continues to flow. And to feed the dam to produce electricity is not only on one stroke, but it will take time. And for this, Ethiopia gave 7 years latitude, from 4 to 7 years to fill it up. And the filling was planned and is still planned during the rainy season when there is a lot of flood in the Nile course, which means that the flow of the Nile will not really decrease in any substantive way from flowing to Sudan or to Egypt. The claim that the Nile is going to be dried up because of this dam is absolute fiction. Any expert, any observer, even a layman like myself, who is not hydrologist, can understand that is not a good story. That is really a false story. So the United States, I think, made a mistake by, in an obvious way, trying to help Egypt by putting pressure on Ethiopia to sign an agreement which, makes the years of feeling into so many years, even to the effect that the filling of the dam itself is doubtful, or maintaining the flow of the water in a natural course, as if Ethiopia is not doing any dam, as if Ethiopia has no really technical ability, to keep the water for the dam and to send the water during, flood season, that the water does not stop. So I think it is mistake that the construction of this dam is really negative for Egypt or Sudan, or the use of the water in the dam will bring substantive and negative results on Egypt and Sudan. But that is not true, and that has not been proven by any study, the IPO study or any other study.
So you've been saying the filling process was agreed upon on the three countries earlier, and if there is any concern, the three countries agreed to find a solution by their own. Now that the Egyptian politicians are making a big diplomatic shuffle here and there, what does that signify, politically speaking?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Now, what Egypt does not get from negotiation with Ethiopia and Sudan, she cannot get from anywhere else, because Ethiopia especially is really asking not anything different, that Ethiopia wants to use the water resources in an equitable and reasonable manner. And that water use does not significantly cause any harm in Egypt or in Sudan as downstream countries. And that has been proven by study, and everybody has been looking at it, including international panel of experts, four internationally renowned persons, like I mentioned earlier, and six renowned engineers from Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. So that was already proven that there is no significant harm, on Egypt. Now, Egypt can go to anywhere, can talk to anybody in the Arab League or in the European Union or North America, but they cannot change those facts, The facts are that Ethiopia is not going to harm Egypt, or Ethiopia's water use does not going to harm Egypt in any significant way. That has been proven by study, and that study is scientific, and that has been evaluated not only by one group, by different groups who evaluated the whole situation. So I think they can do this. They can go shuttle diplomatically and go to so many places. It is their right, and governments always go to their friends and other countries to explain their point of view, but their point of view cannot be changed by refuting what is true and what is on the ground.
Do you think Ethiopia having the truth, as you said, is heralding the truth as the Egyptian?
No, I mean, Ethiopia is doing her bit, but Ethiopia has the facts right, and Ethiopia should not go around and beat, the drum by trying to explain all kinds of, incorrect things, to international communities or, countries, so that Ethiopia does not have to do what Egypt does. Ethiopia can only do that what Ethiopia is doing is not significant harmful to Egypt, and what Ethiopia is doing is absolutely useful and absolutely obligatory for the Ethiopian government to use the Ethiopian water resources to develop, the economy, to, pull out the Ethiopian society, from poverty. This is the point of Ethiopia's diplomacy, to explain to friends and countries who wish to understand the situation between Ethiopia and Egypt. But Ethiopia has facts right on the ground, and Ethiopia has all this, explained to Egypt, to Sudan, and to other countries up to now, and if need be, additional explanation is needed. That is why the high-level diplomats are shuttling. But this is not the first time that the Ethiopian diplomacy is working on this. Ethiopia has been doing this through, normal diplomatic communication before. The scale is different, of course. Ethiopia has been doing this through public diplomacy, which was deployed, to Egypt, to Sudan, and to other Nile Basin countries. And Ethiopia has been doing this through the second track diplomacy, through research groups, through interest groups, through diaspora groups, through national researchers, through university professors, and this being done all along. But this is not the first time. But now the scale is high now because it has to be explained, and countries must not misunderstand. And where Egypt is shuttling is also, the countries and institutions are Ethiopia's friends, like European Union, France, or UK, or Germany, even the Arab countries like Saudi Arabia or UAE, or other countries are also friends with Ethiopia because they want to deal, on the issues of development, and they want to trade, with each other, and they want to exchange, the economic benefits between themselves. So that makes Ethiopia and these Arab countries, to be friendly. And they are not Ethiopia's enemies. Ethiopia can explain to them, look, we are doing this thing, not against Egypt, but for our own benefit. And by doing this, we are not really making things in such a way that our development or our water resource development significant harms Egypt. So that explanation is really, it can be done to anybody who is interested, including the Arab countries.
Yeah, we will be talking about the solution right after. But as the discourse is heating around the girl between the two countries, especially Ethiopia and Egypt, don't you think it is now time to bring the Nile Basin countries, all of them, to sit together and discuss about the equity and fair share of the Nile?
But I mean, that negotiation was concluded way back in the 1910. CFA. CFA is a result, the signing of CFA in Entebbe way back in 2011. In 2010 was the result of the negotiation of all, most of the Nile Basin countries, 9 of them, So that was already done. Now 7 countries adopted it, at the time of, conclusion of the document. 6 countries, signed it, except Congo. Congo opted not to sign, but Congo adopted it. In fact, CFA document was adopted in Kinshasa, in Congo, actually, with the coordination of the Congolese Ministry of Water Resources. But now, during the signature, Congo opted not to sign. That must be for the time being. But they were not against this document in principle. But other countries signed. So already the Nile Basin countries are, in a right course regarding the entire waters of the basin.
My next question is what's going to happen in the future and what would be the Ethiopia's diplomacy in shaping this whole conversation? And I want you to tell me in the context of the genuine Egyptian citizens concerned by this false propaganda which says the Nile is going to be drought anytime soon as the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam is about to fail.
No, I mean anybody in Egypt or anywhere else who is misled that the Nile is going to be dried has to go to school and study.
But those are the farmers, doctor. They don't have to go to school, but they have to listen to you experts in both sides, Egyptian and Ethiopian as well.
Telling you to school means to listen, to what is true, to avoid what is not true. What is not going to dry up. There is no reason on earth that the Nile is going to be dried up because Ethiopia builds Renaissance Dam or any other dam, because Ethiopia is according to the rules expected, to the principles accepted, that the use of water in upstream countries not in a manner to harm the downstream country in a significant way. So that is something to be checked. And as far as the Renaissance Dam is concerned, that has been checked. But to your question, what happens in the future? Let's see the Ethiopian perspective. Ethiopia has to proceed with the filling of the dam, because the filling of the dam is going to be parallel to the construction of the dam. This has been agreed upon way back in 2015. Egypt agreed to this, Sudan agreed to this. And then what happens for yearly operation, then the 3 countries have to come together through their experts and they have to work on this. The yearly operation, whether or not that significant harms Egypt and Sudan, that can be seen. But no other things, that's the agreement. But Ethiopia is obliged to continue to complete the dam and to fill the dam, to provide the Ethiopian public with electricity. And that electricity is not only for Ethiopia. If others want to buy at a much cheaper price, they are welcome as far as Ethiopia is concerned. Sudan is buying, and is willing to buy in the future. And even if Egypt pulls power from Ethiopia, that's in the best interest of Egypt in terms of price and in terms of clean energy. You see, that gives a good option, good alternative for Egyptian power industry. Secondly, Ethiopia must make sure whatever decision Ethiopia makes on the Grand Ethiopian Dam should not negatively impact the development, the future cooperation on other rivers. So Ethiopia should not accept any foreclosure, of development of other water resources in the Nile Basin. And also regionally, what Ethiopia has done is in line with internationally accepted principle that equitable and reasonable utilization and also no significant harm on downstream countries. So this is the accepted principle and this is maintained by Ethiopia. Ethiopia should do this.
Well, before I wrap up, if you want to make any recommendation to both governments, actually, you're welcome.
I think Ethiopia or Egypt or any country, especially in the Nile Basin, they must think that these water resources are shared. Ethiopia must make sure that Egypt understands that Ethiopia has the right to use the water resources in the country without making significant harm on others in the neighborhood, the downstream. And Egypt must understand that Ethiopia has the right to use the water resources in Ethiopia without creating significant harm on downstream Egypt and Sudan. And Egypt cannot really say using water resources in Ethiopia is conclusively, doing significant harm on Egypt, and that's unfounded. And Egypt must really come to senses, and they have to understand this. Ethiopia and Egypt forever will be neighbors, and the Nile will forever be flowing between Ethiopia and Egypt. And the best option is that Egypt and Ethiopia to accept, the good thing that the countries must use the water resources between them equitably and reasonably. I mean, that is repeated kind of principle, but that is the principle which is misunderstood, especially by the Egyptian side. So that is the most important thing to note by the countries. Now Egypt has to catch up with this kind of understanding rather than claiming Egypt for sure has all the rights on the Nile. Egypt has the historical right. Egypt is the only country can use the water resources, that Egypt can give permission to other countries to use the water resources. This is absolutely it's a wrong basis, and I think this is not good attitude for cooperation and for diplomatic interaction.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Yacob Arsano, a senior water politics expert. It's really a pleasure having you in our show.
Thank you so much.
Well, dear viewers, that wraps up what we have for you in this edition of the show. Join us again next week, same time, for yet another edition. This is Aklilu saying salam.